So, what if the COVID-19 pandemic wasn't just some random once-in-a-century event? What if it was something predicted? Today, we're going to walk through a really fascinating and, yeah, pretty controversial timeline that's been put together by our source material. We're going to look at how this whole narrative was built, piece by piece, connecting social media posts, public statements, and huge global events.
Okay, let's just dive right in. Our story really kicks off with this social media post from all the way back in August of 2015. Now, at first glance, it just looks like a standard world population graph, right? But if you look closer at that overlay, you'll see something pretty chilling. It's a projection of a sharp, steep drop in population, and it's labeled Population NWO. That's New World Order, and it's time to start right around the year 2020. This single image is basically the cornerstone for the entire narrative we're going to unpack.
All right, so to really get that 2020 prediction, we actually have to rewind the clock a little bit. The source material we're looking at points to a bunch of what seem like totally unrelated events and statements, but when you look at them through the lens of this particular narrative, they start to paint a pretty compelling and unsettling picture.
So what are these supposed signs? Well, the timeline connects three major dots. First, you've got Bill Gates back in 2010 at a TED Talk talking about new vaccines in the same breath as population growth. Then, 5 years later, he apparently mentions that one of his favorite books is How to Lie with Statistics. And then, just a few months after that, boom, we see that post from the person identified as the prime cleric, Richard Ruff, calling for a world population cull in 2020. Is it all just coincidence? Or, as this story suggests, is there something more going on? Okay, let's fast forward now to the months just before the pandemic hit. This is where, according to our source material, the predictions get way more specific, and the whole timeline just gets a lot more intriguing. So get this, in October 2019, just a couple months before the world turned upside down, Richard Ruff posts this super cryptic message, Silence from Tevet 5780. Now that's a very specific time window on the Hebrew calendar, and it lines up perfectly with late December 2019 through late January 2020. And the word he chose was very specific, silence. Makes you wonder, what could that possibly mean?
So you're probably asking, where did a prediction like that even come from? Well, the source material points right here to an analysis that's presented as a Torah code. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, this is a method where people look for hidden messages in religious texts. They find words at these equidistant letter sequences. And in this narrative, this specific code analysis is presented as the actual source of that silence warning.
The end of 2019 is where this timeline just explodes. I mean, it's a really rapid-fire sequence of events that if you follow this narrative is absolutely no coincidence at all.
Check this out. Just 11 days after that silence prediction was posted online, the Gates Foundation co-hosts something called Event 201. It was a pandemic simulation, and guess what it focused on? A novel coronavirus. A couple months after that, Bill Gates tweets that he's excited for 2020 and calls vaccines a best buy in global health. And then, literally on the last day of the year, the first official reports of a new coronavirus come out of China. You've got a simulation, a tweet, and a real-world outbreak, all presented in just a few short months.
Okay, so once the pandemic is in full swing, the story shifts gears into what our sources call the aftermath. We're talking about the vaccine rollouts, all those reports of unexpected health issues, and of course, the explosive Twitter files. All of this stuff is framed as a confirmation of those earlier predictions about silence and control. Then, in January of 2020, while the entire world is just trying to figure out what's going on with this new virus, a second Torah code analysis shows up, and this one was supposedly even more explicit, presented as a direct reference to the corona, that virus. And this second analysis, according to the source, is just incredibly direct. It apparently links the word corona to words like deceit, hoax, and here's the big one, silencing. That, of course, echoes that prediction from just a few months before. You can see how it's presented as this powerful link that really ties the whole thing together.
And the story just keeps going over the next 2 years. It highlights the rollout of mRNA vaccines and points to those really troubling news reports you might remember about people dying suddenly. It points to major business deals in the global health industry. And then, of course, you have the bombshell release of the Twitter files. Each one of these events, according to the source material, just adds another layer to this story of a pre-planned event and the silencing that followed.
And here we are at what the timeline presents as its grand finale. A really stunning statement from Mark Zuckerberg, years after the fact. He says he regrets caving to government pressure to censor COVID-19 content. Now, for anyone following this particular narrative, this is seen as the ultimate proof, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place.